Lisa Scottoline is the #1 best-selling and Edgar Award-winning author of 33 novels. It's no surprise why she has 30 million copies of her books in print in the United States and has been published in 35 countries. Her books are big-hearted and you get lost in them as a reader. And such a range of books she's produced: standalone thrillers, the Rosada and Associates series, the Rosada and D'Annunzio series, her nonfiction work, and the wonderfully humorous weekly column she writes with her daughter, Francesca Saratella, for the Philadelphia Inquirer, which have been adapted into a series of memoirs. Lisa has served as president of Mystery Writers of America and has taught a course she developed, Justice in Fiction, at the University of Pennsylvania Law School, her alma mater. She's best known for her female-centric legal thrillers, and through them, she's explored the themes of family, justice, and love. Now, tackling many of these same subjects, but through a different lens, is Lisa's first novel of historical fiction, Eternal, where she takes us to Italy as Mussolini is in power, and many still think he's good for the country until things change drastically. The novel is steeped in period detail and full of relatable characters in this saga about love, justice, identity, family, and carbohydrates, while imbued with the same authenticity and relevance as all of her novels, all the way back to her first, Everywhere That Mary Went, published in 1994. Lisa, my incredible writer friend, I am so excited to welcome you back to Gramercy Books and to our Central Ohio community tonight.
Linda, I am so happy to see you again, and I wish I could be there. And I love you. I love the bookstore. I love the community. And I'm so honored by what you said, especially because I know you'll be too modest to say this, but you are a historical fiction author yourself. I just happened to have your first novel, Thousand Song, and I loved it so much. I haven't read the second one, but I must say to everyone that when I was thinking about writing Eternal, I happened to be touring through your store and we were talking about books and historical fiction. I remember saying to you, I'm really thinking about writing this. And you were so encouraging that you signed your book to me. And you were the first person I told. So, you know, I just adore you. And I'm just so happy to be here tonight. So thank you so much.
Well, Lisa, you know, I don't often do the interviewing, and I was so excited to do this one because of you. So the feeling is very, very mutual. And I adored this book.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, you know, I purposely, when I started the introduction, I purposely did not get into the specifics of what Eternal is about. You know, a story about ordinary people caught up in extraordinary circumstances. Can you share a little about the plot of the book for the viewers who maybe haven't read it yet?
Sure. It's basically a love triangle set in fascist Italy. It's a girl, Elisabetta, and she grows up with two guys who like her best buddies, Marco, on the one hand, kind of a brash, popular cyclist, magnetic. You know, Italians would say sometimes that you can't translate as well. So the Italian word is sprezzatura. He has just a magnetism and people just adore him. And all the girls love him. And her other best friend is Sandro, who's just a mathematical prodigy, also handsome, a little more reserved, thoughtful, like a wonderful listening ear. And when the book opens, when she is looking at Marco and I think he will be my first kiss. And then all of a sudden, Sandro gives her a little kiss and we're off and running. And it's really, you know, as you said, I thought it was a wonderful introduction because so few people get that to a certain extent, this is an extension of things I've written before. It's the same themes: family, love, the interplay of justice and law, but set against a dark time. And like Taza's song, it's really the lives of ordinary people and young love and families, because I think my novel does open out, and so does yours, into not only focusing on these young people, but what effect of the life and times of an entire family and an entire society writ large. For my part, I've never written a novel that spans a 20-year time period like this one. It's Mussolini's reign. the Ventennio. So for me, it was a big bite of a meal I've had before, and kind of, I just am very, very happy and very proud to have written it. And we've really come full circle to talk to you about it.
Well, I want to follow up with something you just said, which is this is a change of course for you, and frankly, I saw it as such a courageous move, because you're known for these best-selling crime and legal thrillers, and here we have this coming of age World War II love story, and frankly, the research you put into it is extraordinary. So how did the writing of this book feel different to you from writing your previous novels?
Right. It did because of this. I've been thinking about this novel for a long time, 40 years, in fact, since college. And I have been doing a little bits of research. And when I go to Italy, just soaking it all in, kind of getting immersed in it myself. So a little bit, one of the trips I went back, this is a novel that is fiction, but there are certain events that are based on real fact. And I wanted to specifically, when we see the rise of fascism and this barrage of anti-Semitic laws, which are death by 1,000 cuts, like it's not one single event, it's a course of conduct that the fascists get engaged in that actually result in, when the Nazis occupy Rome, the rounding up of the ghetto. And so when I went back on one of the trips, I actually went on the 75th anniversary of this event, which took place in October 1943, a real true life event that really hasn't been discussed in popular American fiction. And I went to the memorials, and I was invited, and I talked to people. And so it imbued me with the responsibility that I had. When you see the names, and some of these memorials were so artfully done. And there was one in particular where there would just be like the name of the victim written in ashes, and just restoring the name to these people that had been taken away. And when I was writing, so the difference in writing this was that I felt that I had to make this real. And as you did in Tassa's song, you have to make the incomprehensible, not only comprehensible, but inevitable and understandable, and at a kitchen table. And I was aware that I had an obligation to those who were lost and to their families. My thing was this: when I learned about what happened in Rome, and I'm Italian American, I thought I knew a lot about Rome. And when I started to investigate, I, of course, did all this research, but also consulted a historian or two. And the one who will remain nameless, I said, why, there's essentially a war crime that takes place in Rome. Why was there no Nuremberg? And he said, nobody wanted another Nuremberg. And I thought, I do. I mean, I thought, where's the justice in this situation? You have victims, you have a crime, the victims are gone, the criminals are gone. How can we get justice? For me, I can only do what I can do, which is tell the story. And that's kind of why I'm so proud that the book is in the world. Just makes me happy that the story is known.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you'd mentioned that this story has been brewing in you for a long time. So I'd love you to take us back to that time when you first started thinking, and I understand it was about 40 years ago, that you started thinking about this story, and you were in a class at University of Pennsylvania.
Right.
I'm not going to say more. I'd like you to share.
I will. Well, I was an English major at Penn, and I never dreamed I'd be a novelist. I secretly did want to be one, but I was lucky enough during the time I was there that the late author Philip Roth taught a course there, and it was a seminar for only 15 people. And it was about the novel, and every class we were wrapped, because it was, I still think it was like taking physics from Einstein, because he was such a brilliant man and such a brilliant novelist, and basically would take a novel and break it down and talk about the arc of the characters and talk about the paragraph, then take down the sentence, then talk about the verb choice. So it was really like the best boot camp you could ever have in writing a novel. But he was the one who introduced us, because part of the course was literature of the Holocaust. You know, what you said in the intro was very true. He said once, it's not about the Holocaust per se, it's about the behavior of ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. And I never forgot that, because we will all, you know, undergo them, certainly not at the level of the Holocaust, but he wanted to make it personal. So he introduced us to the work of Primo Levi, an Italian Jewish chemist who was an anti-fascist, was eventually taken and sent to Auschwitz, but survived to write the incredible memoir, Survival in Auschwitz. And Roth felt that the Italian Holocaust was kind of ignored. And then when I saw this, I thought, I kind of agree. And the more I learned about it, the more I read about it. Then when I found about this sort of, I'll call it the Gold of Rome incident, I felt like, okay, someday I'm going to, if I ever get to be a writer, and I'll maybe I can tell this as a story, and it's been brewing in me all this time. Frankly, I felt like I was learning on the job. You know, I'm not like the most super secure person. So I never thought, oh, you get this done, no problem. I actually feel like I've been always working on these themes, and where my other novels will be like about one family, this is about three, and where they take place in a week, this takes place in the 20 years. And we're talking about themes that are eternal and global. And so it was, I was dying to do it. And I also knew that it would eat me alive if I didn't. So, but it really began, thanks. Look, I always think it's a little bit of an homage to teachers, that even if the teacher's as famous as Philip Roth, that teachers, can you imagine have the influence on someone that 40 years later, they produce a work that they think they were born to write? That's amazing.
Well, you know, I am so envious. I have not told you this, but I went to Penn. And if I would, I was there 2 years. I graduated 2 years, I think, before you did.
I graduated 76.
Okay, 75. And I did not know there was a course taught by Philip Roth. And I am like so envious, because I think he was there your year.
I think, yes. He didn't do it.
Yeah. And so I just like, can you take us into his class? I know I saw something that was a black and white photo that you took of him teaching.
Oh, and I don't have it here. And I took it. I don't have it. Because I was on the yearbook staff. And I was, first off, like, you know, as you are, I mean, I felt like first off, you love novels. I'm a bookaholic. Like this is part of my signed collection. Here, I'll show you the rest. Like, look, it's like crazy. So basically and I'm fine with that. Woo! So to be in a class, like I just wanted to be in the same room with Philip Roth. You go like, how do you get to be us to them? And it was really, and I think the class was mostly women. All the English majors was mostly women. And it was very interesting because I give him credit for that. Actually, I wrote something about this for the Times once, because he wasn't like Mr. Friendly. He wasn't there like this is 70s. Remember, everybody's like, the professors are, call me Ellen, call me Joe. He's like, call me Mr. Roth. And I'm like, okay. He didn't have office hours. He didn't relate to us, which I'm fine with. I totally understood. And we were all like agog, basically, because it's just cool to meet somebody who does it. I mean, I felt the same way in law school. You can teach a law school class, but when you talk to a lawyer, you're going to get the skinny. And I felt like we were getting the skinny. Like a guy was going to show us why one verb in a sentence by Flaubert was better than another one, and compare it. And you can't buy that. So it was really remarkable. I still can't believe how lucky I was. And I think he only taught it like 1 or 2 years. So I'm sorry you missed it.
I am too, but I'm living it through you now.
That's skinny girl.
Well, let me take a little back on something you had mentioned, you know, earlier of these extraordinary, you know, we have both talked about ordinary people caught up in extraordinary times. And, you know, you can't help but talk about the fact that, you know, we are in a pandemic. We're kind of hopefully at the latter part of the pandemic, but you were writing this book during a pandemic, and you know, we're now only recently returning to restaurants, and you know, we're certainly not traveling abroad, and you know, yet here we are in your book in Rome, and the book is like a love letter to the city, and inside its finest restaurants. I mean, mouth-watering pastas. And I'm just wondering, was the pandemic on your mind while you were writing?
That's so fascinating because first of all, happily, I had done the physical research, gone there before it hit. So I was able, but I will recall for you, I will butcher a quote from Dante right now. And he says something like, there is no greater sorrow than to look back in times of happiness. The idea being that somehow it's multiplied when you're going through something. And I thought, so as you know, if you're writing something, you're not supposed to tell, you're supposed to show. And I wanted this great sweep, like I wanted a sweep of time. You don't call a book eternal for nothing. And a little bit, I said, well, you have to show food is, this is a culture that lives to eat. And there are lots of cultures like that. But I wanted the reader to always know that you were in Rome. And in the beginning, the book opens in fascisms. Everybody's fascist. You don't really know that because what's happening is they're happy, they're in love, they're eating. And what happens, and part of the reason I showed that vis-a-vis the Dante quote, is that when Mussolini decides to join sides with Hitler. Let me just as a quick footnote, which is so unique to Rome and Italy in this time period, that when fascism started, and Mussolini started it, his was the first fascist party, remarkably. When it started, it was not anti-Semitic at all. Roman Jews were completely assimilated. The intermarriage rate was 50%. The mayor of Rome was Jewish. There wasn't anti-Semitism until Mussolini decided to side with Hitler. And interestingly, until that point, Roman Jews and Jews throughout fascism, throughout Italy, joined the fascist party in the same percentage as Gentiles. So I thought that's where you should really write about this, because the betrayal of the Jews by the fascists is so doubly intense because they had welcomed them before. So I forget where this was going. So then when the Nazis come in, certainly when the war starts, food is rationed. And I wanted the reader to feel what it was like. And then when the Nazis come in, horrifyingly, they basically weaponize food against the Jewish ghetto, the ghetto as it's called. So you had to know that deprivation and feel it. I mean, I remember there's a part when Sandro's family is sitting down to dinner, and we have seen them eat before, and they love fried foods and they love food. And I gave them one of my mother's favorite recipes. But they have to sit down before a plate of pasta, and there's not very much. And the tomato sauce is watered down. And I thought, that's sad. Like, everyone can know what that, I wanted the reader to feel that in order to understand these characters and these families and the real people, what they went through.
I mean, and they had to go to the black market to get flour and these restaurants. I mean, that was another thing that, you had two major characters in the novel own restaurants, and particularly this Cafe Servano, owned by Nonna Servano, which we'll talk about later. But, right. It got to a point where, there was only one dish they could make even during these times of food shortage. And so it did, reading the book and being in the pandemic made me feel so much, of sort of how, there's loss and there's sacrifice, and obviously a world war is that much.
But I forgot that, and that's a really good point, because the pandemic was instructive to me, because you've written historical fiction and I loved it and I always love it, but I hadn't written it before. And as I said, I was a little intimidated, and the pandemic was instructive a little bit, because I thought, it's interesting. These characters were like us last March. In other words, it's so fascinating when you play with these concepts of time. When you are entering a period of history, you don't know it. Mm-hmm. Right? You're living your life. Here we were last March going, well, geez, this is really a bad, scary virus. Hope it doesn't come over here. And then when it comes over here, we're like, oh man, well, this is probably going to take 2 weeks. And then and that happens to these characters. Fascism is a state of being. Older people, parents, older siblings in the novel can remember. I remember when there wasn't propaganda in the books. And then we learned that, Mussolini makes radio so that everybody can hear his speeches. So you sort of, you can look back on this time and go, that was the Ventennio, Mussolini's reign. But if you live through that day by day, you're a frog in hot water, right? You just, what's happening. And that's the cool thing about history to me. When I saw that interplay, I was like, normal people living their lives day to day until you look up and go, wow, this is something of epic proportion.
Well, my experience, my knowledge was more in Eastern Europe. And so I learned so much in your novel. And I know, since I've been doing research for our interview, how you have integrated some of the very important real historical context within story, within characters. And like you just mentioned these things, and I had no idea. As you said, fascism was in the beginning something that everyone bought into. There were Jewish fascists, and that there was no anti-Semitism, and all of this, happened there. What was scary is that I learned in your book, it happened so quickly because the race laws really didn't hit Italy till mid 1938. And here they've already been incorporated in Germany in 1935. Right. So, and then boom, Mussolini turns and, befriends Hitler and life changes. And so it was such drama and such authenticity and such reality also. I wonder if you'll share a couple of, I think about this one hospital scene.
Right. Oh, I will tell you.
I don't want to be a spoiler.
It's so crazy because I learned so much. And I was like, I said to myself, you don't know you don't know what you're doing. So I was like, you got to write this novel just like you'd write any other novel. By the way, I write with no outline. So that's really scary. So here I basically had all this information. And it was like total immersion. And my friends will tell you, like I had the TV on and I watched, Rossellini, and I was the music. And so the bottom line is that I was just immersed in it. And though I learned these little historical nuggets, I said, you cannot crowbar them in. You can't do that. This has to be organic. So like that, then that's what you do. You just write, what would these characters logically happen next? So it was sort of interesting because I was able to get them in and I was so happy. And partly because of proximity. There's I don't even have the book, but there's there's a map in the front of the book, which I got from this, because I got to get all this old original stuff. Here's a map from 1925. And why it's interesting, because I didn't, isn't this adorable? Anyway, my publisher so wonderfully said I could reproduce it. We got the rights and everything. But it's the short answer to why it got in there, because it naturally would have been in there. Because interestingly, we all know that Rome is the seat of Vatican City and Roman Catholicism, but really how many people know that it is also home to the oldest continuously existing Jewish community in Western civilization? And that these two are 20-minute walk over Tiber Island, and you can see it on the map. And actually, believe it or not, we have an interactive map on my website, and all of the 20 videos that I took in Rome for research are also housed there too. So so it was very natural. I said, well, gee, if you got sick, you'd go to the hospital. And what actually happened, we can give something away, is there's the Catholic hospital where Sandro's mother works. And one of the characters gets sick. And what this hospital did was an incredible, it's one of these sort of uplifting stories in this darkness. I want to tell both, though. We're not sanitizing anything. And the hospital administrator, his name was Giovanni Borromeo. When Nazis come in and they want to kill all the Jews in Rome, and everywhere they can get, they go to the hospital and they demand of the hospital administrator, show me your Jewish patients. What the hospital administrator does is they hear they're coming, and they basically do a ruse where they put all the Jewish patients in one ward and make up this incredible, we'll tell it, right? This incredible ruse, which is, and how timely, that they make up a virus. And they say when the Nazis come storming in, I want your Jewish, they say, we don't know who's Jewish here. We're a Catholic hospital. We treat without regard to religion. And then let me search in there. If you search in there, you will contract an airborne virus that will infect your brain. This is exactly what they did. I mean, it's documented. and it will kill you, and it will kill your bosses, and it will kill all your men. And all the Nazis are in the hall going, is this really worth it? So, and the guy says, listen, is this worth it to you? Because we don't even go in that ward. All those people are dead.
Yeah.
And the Nazis turn around, and the Jewish patients were truly saved by this Catholic hospital. And there's also the story of Monsignor O'Flaherty, a Monsignor. I didn't know that Jews were hidden in the Vatican during the Nazi occupation. And certainly there's a lot. What I like to do is to present what I learned in this hopeful way that is, it's dramatized in a way, but you understand it, and you make your own judgments about everyone's behavior during this time. There are those who criticize the Vatican for not doing enough. There's those who criticize the Vatican for doing too much. So everybody has a view. And I actually went to the library at Penn, and bottom line, got all of the telegrams during this time period, which were so fascinating. And between the Vatican and the head of municipality of Rome, the Questora, that was where I found out what the actual price of an egg on the black market was. And I was very proud of that. I put it all in there, man. Honestly. But it was interesting to see the interplay of politics and law and justice of the time.
Well, there's one very big historic fact. You alluded to it earlier. I'm probably not going to pronounce the word right. The Rastrellamento, which is the roundup. And my understanding, I'd read somewhere, Lisa, that you had said that writing about that October 1943 roundup of the Jews was really the hardest thing for you to write. And just, can you share what that was like? Why?
It really was. I mean, I love books, and I love reading, and I love people who read. And part of the reason that I think all that is true is because reading builds empathy. Beatty says a novel is a unified consciousness. That's very cool. I sort of think of it as like you're stepping into somebody's soul. And so I have to open my heart up, and I really have to empathize with these characters, even the ones I don't like. But I certainly liked the ones I liked. So I felt like these families, I could imagine what that was like. And also this situation in Rome, like I said, the death by 1,000 cuts was so interesting, because there's things that the Nazis do before they do the roundup that are just cruel. And not physically cruel, more emotionally cruel. Like an example, like the cruelty is what, and I thought to myself, why do they do these things in advance? The hard question that no one has asked is, why do you do these things in advance of the roundup of the ghetto when you could do them after? And the answer can only be cruelty. So that's why I said to myself, because when I've handed this manuscript in, it was 1,000 pages. And I know, but I have a wonderful editor. And he said, I think it should begin on page 300. And I was like, he's right. Because I couldn't leave any of this out. Because for me, I wanted to write something, and it's the lawyer in me and it's the teacher in me that just said, this has to be definitive. You can't make it like a rate of any other ghetto, because it isn't. There are some similarities, but there are really major differences. And also why that matters is it's more heartbreaking, because what was really going on in Europe is because Italy was so friendly to Jews in the beginning, people fled to Italy thinking they would be safe. And it was completely understandable why Sandro's family, for example, given the choice to leave, does not go. And then when they realize that it might be their perdition, if they don't leave, they choose not to go because they want to help their community. And I thought there was empowerment in that. So it just was emotional. It was emotional. And certainly I put in the names of the people I put in some real people's names, because I wanted their story to be in this story, because this is theirs. And, it's hard. I think that to the extent that that end of the novel, the sort of the centerpiece of the novel, has a dramatic impact, and I think it does, but I take no credit. I actually think it is from the truth. I think the truth has its own ring, and it underlines this narrative, and people know it when they're reading it.
Well, also the truth is, just look at the settings. You referred to the book. I actually took the book off my desk. The maps you're talking about of the entire city on the inside of the book,
Right.
Are, on both inside the front cover and the back cover, completely.
It's so
And, you know, you chose some central locations. I mean, where you situated real locations, where you situated the three families.
right.
Tiber, is it Tiber?
Tiber.
Island,
Yeah.
the Jewish ghetto,
Right.
and Trastevere.
Yeah.
And so, you know, people are in real places in Rome and are situated.
Right.
How did you choose those three places in
Well,
writing?
you know, it's interesting. And I have the videos on my website about the actual places so people can see them, but I think I described them fairly well. Is that I thought everything has to illuminate character, as you know. You know, when you talk about Anastasia's Tassa's her love of violin, and when she's in these hard times, she thinks about, I'm talking about your book if people didn't tune in the beginning, you know, she turns to music with her love for Danik. You know, they share music together. So everything is illustrative of character. So I thought it was sort of interesting because you would have Sandro in the ghetto because he's Jewish and his family is Jewish. And that history is so profoundly interesting. And then not far, it's a 5-minute walk. They're all kids, they're all friends. And so Tiber Island's in the middle. It's on the oldest bridge in Rome. There's only one kind of house there. It's right across from the hospital in real life. And I said, well, let's make that Marco's. It also happens to be a bar. But I like that because Marco is so open and extroverted, and he's really a connector. So I thought that's kind of cool. He lives on a bridge. He connects them. He's like that kind of person, you know. Cool. And Elisabetta is kind of artsy. Her parents are kind of artsy. She wants to be a writer. Of course, she decides to be a journalist just when the only people who get hired is propagandists. She makes a lot of, she's on her own. And I kind of known for writing strong women characters, and I really feel like she is one. And she's artsy and she lives in this bohemian quarter. So each place that they live illuminates who they are. And all of the settings are real, you know, got Gestapo headquarters and the Collegium Militare, which is the military school. And also weirdly, interestingly, where Jews were taken when they were rounded up, also where the memorial that I went to was held. So, you know, that's what got me. I remember I'm lucky enough with my other books to be published in Italy and have toured in Italy. And my Italian publisher took me to the ghetto for artichokes. Oh, you have to have the artichokes. And knowing what I did, I said, this is, you know, this is hallowed ground. Mm-hmm. Like, and at that point, there was no plaque, there was nothing. Now there's a tiny museum and people, and there are, you know, other signifiers, but not enough, not enough. So I'm happy to tell that story. I am.
Well, you mentioned character, Lisa. I wanted to kind of get a little bit into the writing process. I also want to remind the audience that please put your questions in the Q&A box. We'll get to those shortly. But I wanted to, you mentioned character, and I mean, we're talking about such relatable characters. They could be your mother, your sister, your next door neighbor. I mean, these characters are so very real. These whole families, this whole community you create. How do you start writing and in your mind have some of these characters already kind of thought through? I know you've said you don't do an outline, and you know, God, I don't know. I kind of,
it's scary.
I play around with outlines that change, just so I have to, just because.
And that makes sense. That's
crazy. But how do you develop these? At what point are you developing these characters? Because they are absolutely real characters, and you're them.
Oh, thank you. You know, I wish I could give the cool answer, but the answer is I struggle along. I mean, I try to think about, I think, you know, everything has to, even fiction has to have an emotional truth to it. And I said, well, your task is not to think about this writ large, because writ large, it'll be scary. It's like, can you clean your house in one day? No, you can't, but you can maybe clean a drawer. So I said, okay. I thought about Elisabetta. And I thought, well, what's her thing? Well, a little bit at that age, it just sounds embarrassing because I'd never read this in it. But I said, well, a key thing for a young girl is your first bra. And I gave her what happened to me, which is I was a tomboy and I didn't care about bras. And the girls came up to me in 6th grade and said, you need a bra. And I was like, so embarrassed. And I carried my book. And I don't know if girls remember the days when you get like, you'd carry your book like this. And you kind of hide your chest. And long story short, I had a great experience because I went home and told my mother and cried, and my mother was wonderful. She said, "We'll get you a bra, honey." And we went to Horn and Hard Arts. I don't know if anybody knows what Horn and Hard Arts is. Is that just a Philly thing? In any event, she took me out for apple pie and we bought a bra. Elizabeth's mother is not a very good mother, so she doesn't do that. So it becomes really important to Elizabetta. So I said, you got to make it small. You got to make it that intimate. Don't worry about the rest of the stuff. Just actually go, what would happen next? And how I form a character is a little bit like, well, I always think we are what we do. So I just knew what Marco looked like. I didn't know what he was like. And then I thought, he has this great magnanimous, he's open, but also he has a secret. And that didn't occur to me till right then. I was like, well, modern readers will realize he's dyslexic. So it was all then I'm like, oh my God, I don't know anything about dyslexia in the 1930s in Rome. So you got to research it. And they were kind of ahead of the curve. Maria Montessori was from Rome. So it's kind of like, but still, he would feel it wasn't advanced enough. He feels very, very inferior to certainly Sandro, who's brilliant, and Elisabetta, who loves books. And he wants to compete for her affection. And what that gave me was, I said, well, gee, this is interesting because that's what draws him to fascism.
Exactly.
Right? Which I didn't plan it, but fascism's pitch was, it was called Romanità, Italianità, ultra nationalism that at first looks patriotic, but it says to a kid like Marco, you think you're dumb? You're not dumb. You are the glory that was Rome. We were, it's not a bad argument, the most glorious civilization. We conquered the world. We built aqueducts. That's who you are, son. And he gets puffed up. So he is naturally attracted to fascism. And of course, it creates conflict with Elisabetta, who is kind of anti-fascist, and Sandro, who ultimately is a fascist, but whom the party will turn against. And the setting and the times were so rich. And of course, it made me think the settings in our times are so rich. Setting and times, if you really get to plummet, which I don't always get to do in previous novels, and I'm going to do from now on, even in a thriller, because everything gives you something that grounds character and drives action. And all is of a piece, all at the same time. You just have to be able to not be afraid. And also know, as Hemingway says, write drunk, edit sober. Right. So your first draft will be you going, and what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And your second draft will be going, Scottoline, you enough already. Like, enough already is a big thing for me. I say, get it down, then get it good. That's my little motto.
Well, let me ask you, because we're going to have to get to the questions, and
Sure.
I encourage again people to ask questions. We have a couple I'm going to share in a moment, but just my final kind of question. I have about obviously many more, but unfortunately the time, I never talk for 3 hours. But anyway, the title. So did you always think that Eternal would be the title? Eternal sort of can represent so many things. I know what your epigraph was. Maybe talk a little about that title, and is it what you began with, and what does it mean to you? And what
it's so cool that you asked that, because I have such a hard time with titles, but this didn't. And I can tell you exactly when. I'll tell it short, but I was in Rome at one of these, you say these fine restaurants, and we give the wrong idea. The food was great. The price is zilch, right? It's cheap. And I had this pizza that was so good that I actually cried. No, seriously, I bit into this and I was crying. And I actually, I grabbed the waiter. I was like, do you know how good this pizza is? And he's like, get your hands off me. It's crazy. But at that, I remember that day because I looked around me in Rome and I thought of the word, which I think I learned for SAT vocab, which was palimpsest. I've never had occasion to use the word. I didn't even know I knew it. Long story short, it's when in medieval times, monks would write on manuscript, which was hide, and they would write something. And then of course they'd need to write over it because there's only so much hide in the world, and they'd wipe it away, but the writing would still be there. And a palimpsest came to be known as a layer of time made visible. And when I looked at Rome, I saw marble from the Roman times and brick, crumbling brick, and that great stucco from Trastevere. And I saw an array of different layers of civilization. And I said, that is a palimpsest. And then I said, must be the power of carbohydrates, like you said, because I said, the best example of a layer of time made visible is a family, is a generation upon generation and upon generation. And then I thought, because I always think a little bit, I was so close to my mother, sadly she passed. And I'm a single mother, so I was so close to my daughter. The three of us were like a little bit of a constellation. And I thought, people say they're turning into their mother. And I kind of want to say, honey, you already are, like a little bit. It made me think about the conflation of time. And that this notion, like Faulkner says, past isn't even past. It's not prologue. It's now. And that I said to myself, eternal is the title, because it's about all of those things and the things that last, that you can't write a novel about war without it being anti-war. You can't understand these things without seeing those dichotomies. And Primo Levi, and I'll stop after this, I'll butcher this quote too, but he said, as soon as you start to think that someone is different from you, this is so critically important. He said, you will start to think that they are other. And as soon as you think they are other, you will think they are less. And as soon as you think they are less, in the end, there is a camp. And I thought, that is the problem. That is exactly right. And so you start to think about that fact. And that's why I think in a way this novel is uplifting, because I think I said it outright. Hate is eternal, but so is love.
Yeah.
And war is eternal, but so is peace. So I really wanted to, almost like Sandra would have done, prove it mathematically. And I kind of think I might have, I hope anyway.
Well, you did a wonderful job.
Oh, thank you.
It is a story. I mean, it kept me up at night because I could not put it down.
Oh, that's
so. Anyway, I'm going to start with a question here, and I want to remind the audience. I think some people are putting a couple questions in chat that we are not monitoring. So please take your question and take it from chat and put it in the Q&A box, please. So let me start with Lori's the first question from Lori. The cats are very important to Elisabetta, yet you have a king cavalier and you love dogs. I would have to guess. Can you speak to why it was important for Elisabetta to have a pet in her life and just incidental?
Oh, well, I have 4 dogs. And I also have 2 cats, and I have a bunch of chickens and horses too. So I'm like and I live alone. And I thought that's a little bit the touchstone, because I think that Elisabetta is missing so much. And I gave her this sentiment, which I'll say, I don't know if it will sound corny, but I thought it was kind of true, which is that you can't control whether you get love. You don't know if you'll meet somebody. You don't know if your parents will be good. Her parents are not. She is very much doesn't feel loved, but she has this cat and she loves the cat. And what she thinks at one point is, your heart doesn't know whether love is being given to you or you are giving love. It's just full of love regardless. And I thought you're trying something emotionally true. I think that's true. I mean, I haven't had a date in a long time, but I love my daughter, but she lives in New York. Well, I can fill up my house and I got a barn and I rescue horses, and it's all of these things make me happy. And so many of us, you don't know where life will take you. You don't know if you're going to be divorced, widowed, or what's going to happen. You don't know if you're going to be in a pandemic. You might have to rescue a dog to keep you company. Ain't nothing wrong with that, just so long as you stand by that dog later. So I'm a cat person too. And that's why, though, as I say, I mean, I love to see animals in books, but she's the one who has it, and she has them for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, now Samantha has a question. She said, what is Lisa working on now, and when can we expect to see it? I had read that Eternal was originally going to be a 3-book series. Does she want to write more historical fiction?
Yes, she does. Well, what's happening? I just am finishing a domestic thriller next. So it's sort of, I just love, look, I've turned 65. I feel like I'm a count your blessings person, like every day. I can't believe I have a life in books. And so I have too many. And these are all from independent bookstores, by the way. Oh, this is the signed portion. That's where you get in. That's where you get signed books, indies, right? And I was so proud when this book made the independent bestseller list and was on the Indie Next list. Now I forgot what I was saying. Oh, so I feel lucky that happily this book has been well received. And that means, this being America, I get to do another one. So I'm almost finished a thriller, which I also love writing too. I think all writing feeds you. The next thriller is different and richer, I think, because I wrote historical fiction. And I already have an idea for the next historical fiction. And I feel very, very lucky to be able to grow as a writer. I think it's really important because, honestly, not for my sake, for my reader's sake, right? I think people feel when you are excited about what you're doing. And I always, since I was broke for so long, like 15 years trying to become a writer, I'm very aware that we ask for something that costs money. And particularly now in the pandemic, I'm very aware that people, if they want independent bookstores to survive, have to buy books from them. This is how it works. So I always think to myself, you have to deliver. Somebody has to feel like they got their money's worth. It's really simple. It's a product that you ask them to buy, even though it's art that comes from your soul. So I'm lucky to be able to write the thriller next and historical fiction and next. And I do write the humor columns, which are on my Facebook page for free every Sunday. Come look at them. They're fun.
Well, we are lucky because you give us enjoyment and knowledge and passion. But let me take the next question.
Okay.
This is from Kate. Kate says that, let me move this over here. I am from the Philadelphia area and just wanted to say how much I've enjoyed your columns in the paper. Are there any that you particularly remember that resonated with you strongly?
Yes. I mean, okay, I'll just tell it fast because we have other questions and stuff. I also think it's important to write about emotional truth and literal truth. So, and aging is something of that. So I remember the time that I wrote about finding my first gray chin hair and realizing that I was turning into an Amish man. And I was like, and I didn't want to write it. And I plucked my chin for this tonight. I just want you to know, I'm showing you that I plucked for you. And I said, you know what? And when I told my daughter I was writing that, she said, don't write that. That's so embarrassing. And that was when we both said, you know what? Because I said to her, no, I don't want this to be like some jokey sitcom sanitized version, because people will know it's BS. And that's when she and I both developed this thing that we say, which is, if it doesn't make me cringe, it won't make you laugh. And I actually applied that to Eternal, because obviously this very, very serious novel. But there are parts that I thought, if you have to tell this very true, if this doesn't make you cringe in a sad way, if this doesn't make you cry, no one's going to feel it, girl. So I learned something about writing from my gray chin hair. So there is a thank you, God.
Oh, God. That's great. Well, let me also say, and you have such a range of writing that I did say in the beginning. It's absolutely incredible, from this propulsive drama, the thrillers, and then humor. It just, you do it all. You do it all. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible. Now, Peter has I love this question. Peter asks, at what point in your writing did you decide on the way in which the fates of Sandro, Marco, and Elisabetta would be linked together forever? By the way, he said, I finished reading the novel this morning and was so struck with the way in which pain and the joy blended together. Couldn't have been said better.
That's a lovely thing to say. Thank you, Peter. There was no point when I decided it. And I thought, as soon as I gave myself the assignment, that, because it just came to me, I said, oh, this girl is going to choose between these two guys who are both great guys. And who, by the way, this is a novel about love. You get a choice of what you want to put in the beginning. And I've been pulling quotes. I have so many quotes. I'm like, you can't have all those quotes. But I came to the quote at the beginning, which is love conquers all. And I must tell you that I put it up there in the draft, and I thought, Lisa, you got to do better than that. That sounds like a greeting card. Like, that's a little trite. You're supposed to, can you come up with something more pretentious? God knows you're pretentious, and you can throw a little more heat than that. And, but I kept coming back to it, because this is a novel not only about romantic love, but the love between these families, that the Terrizzi stand by, Simone's, and the love between these two boys, and also love of country. And I thought to myself, so when I gave myself the assignment, how is she going to choose? Will she choose between Sandra or Marco? I said, this is such a hard assignment you just gave yourself, because it's no win. Somebody's going to get hurt. How will she choose? And I said, well, that's the good thing. I always think whatever the thing you think is scary, that's why it's good. And so just, I thought she's going to be a journalist. Then I did the research and found that, only journalists or propagandists go. Now what is she going to do? And then I discovered Deletta, who won the Nobel Prize, the first Italian woman to win it. And I said, oh, here's this book and it's about alcoholism. And wow, I didn't make that up. Essentially I've trained writing thrillers for a long time, and they're always realistic to the law, the criminal procedure, the police procedure. They have to be. My name's on the cover, and I like to think I have some integrity. So I said, you got to write historical fiction at the pace of a thriller, which, by the way, you did in Tassa's Song. I mean, you completely immersed and it goes along. It doesn't have to be a big ponderous slog. It should move fast, but has to be comprehensive. So the answer, Peter, I wish I could tell you there was a pinpoint, but it really wasn't until the time that Elizabeth makes that choice. I remember the scene. Her cat helps her. And I said, because I'm thinking about what my cats and dogs think all the time. When my daughter is home, all we do is talk about what the cats and dogs are thinking. It's crazy. And so I think, so that was when I made it the same moment Elizabeth made it, and the same way.
Wonderful.
It's lucky. It's lucky.
Samantha asks, I kind of can answer this question for you, but I'll let you do this. She says, will you and Francesca, it's Susan. I have not read any of your books yet. Sorry. Do you think Eternal is the one to begin with?
Yes, absolutely.
That's what
let me just mention this. You mentioned Francesca, and Mother's Day is here. My daughter has become a novelist in her own right, with Ghosts of Harvard. And it was just nominated for Best First Novel by Thriller Writers. So we're
that's fantastic.
Yes, I'm celebrating this weekend. We're going to have a FaceTime, and she's sending a present. We're going to drink together.
Well, Samantha wants to know if you and Francesca publish more chick wit books together. And she said, I hope.
I hope to. Thank you for that. But till then, you can read because I still am writing the column, as is Francesca. But I think that I forgot what the original question was. But in any event, I'm sure I gave the answer to it.
Yeah, that it's the question about.
But where should you start? Absolutely,
Eternal is absolutely.
Because honestly, if people are thinking about writing, I would really encourage you. And I did. Francesca came to it herself, but I did encourage her because I think we don't have a monopoly on it. You don't have to go to school for it. Just read a lot. I really suggest you read a lot. And I really suggest you just sit down and do it. As Anne Lamott says in Bird by Bird, give yourself permission to write a, quotes, shitty first draft, because that's right, drunk, edit, sober. Nobody saw my first draft. But why that is an answer to the question is like trying to, believe it or not, over 35 years, trying to improve my writing. So that I think that the last thing I wrote is always the best thing. And this is next level. Eternal was next level for me.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think that any of your books can be, the earlier questioner asked about whether Eternal is the best book to start with. I think you could start with any of your books, but certainly, Eternal would be a great one. And I think that you've your longtime followers of your legal thrillers, I think that, you've gained new readers, and I think that your loyal readers will come right there with you. So Eternal is a wonderful book, whether it's the first or the 33rd for you.
Thank you for that. That is, I want to tell you a brief story. That is high praise coming from you, because when we met and I came to your amazing bookstore, which is just so gorgeous and so tastefully done, you have some incredible, and when I do that, I generally say to a bookseller, especially one like you, what should I be reading? This was way back when. And you said, there's this book that I'm really in love with, but I don't know if you won't have heard of it. It's new. And it was called Where the Crawdads Sing. You were the first person to put that book in my hands. I read it on the plane back. I was like, this book is really good. And then it spent the next 2 years on the bestseller list. So when Linda says something is good, I was like, oh my God. I bought it from you. I don't know if you remember that.
I do. I
I was
do.
like, this is a pretty cover. I like orange.
Oh, well, Addie has a question to ask, and it's actually one of the questions I didn't get to ask, which is, who are some of your favorite authors? Which books have had the biggest impact on you? And I might add, what books or authors have inspired or informed your work?
Well, this is going to sound like I'm punting, but I'm not, because I love to read and I read everything. But I really think that I learned something about writing or storytelling from everything that I read. I do give myself permission not to finish a book, which I think I'm telling you all, if you don't want to read the book, you don't have to read the book. Life is short. And I always have a secret thing that I'm a little bit in training of my brain. So I don't want to read bad stuff. So I have so many authors of historical fiction. Linda Kass. I really love Adriana Trigiani. I love Martha Holt Kelly. Paula McLean is terrific. And you're going to have her on, which is going to be awesome, because I love When the Star Goes Dark, When the Stars Go Dark, we were on a library panel together about genre swapping. Oh God, Lisa Wingate, there's so many. Jodi Picoult, these people behind me, my signed collection of the people I really, really love. And in thrillers, David Baldacci, Harlan Coben. I like books that move fast. I also like books that go deep. Louise Penny. There are just so many. Lorenzo Carcaterra just came out with a great memoir. I just read Chris Bogelian's. I interviewed him, Hour of the Witch, which was sensational historical fiction. So I go, I just learn from everybody, and I feel really lucky in that way. Books are amazing. Books are magic.
They are magic.
They are magic, man.
And your books are magic. And I'm afraid that we're, unfortunately, just at the end of our time. I mean, oh my gosh, what a pleasure this has been to
so
talk
sweet
with you tonight.
I adore you.
We can sit there for another hour, but we're not, because we told people we were not. We were doing an hour. So what a remarkable book, and what a wonderful audience. Great questions. It's been so fabulous. And I just want to say to the audience, if you haven't read Lisa's novel, you need to do so now. And you need to tell everyone about Eternal. We've added a link in the chat box if you'd like to purchase a copy, or if you'd like to purchase another copy for your mother, your father, your sibling, or your best friend. And I do want to quote something that I saw. It's too good. It was a starred review for Eternal in Library Journal. So what I would suggest to our audience, as you sit down to read it, if you haven't already, and I will quote Library Journal, quote, "Make a plate of fettuccine, pour a glass of red wine, and settle in with this captivating tale. You will cry tears of sadness and joy." And that's the quote from the starred review from Library Journal. So big thanks to everyone joining us this evening, and particularly to you, Lisa, for writing such an incredible novel for us.
Linda, thank you so much. Thanks to everyone who came. I really appreciate it. But most importantly, take great care of this bookstore. It is a treasure, and Bexley is lucky to have it. Columbus is lucky to have it. And I'm just so grateful to have been talking to you today. Thank you so much.